Hello, dear audience and friends and family from across the globe tuning in to the highest show on YouTube. Today we have an interesting story from across the pond, as they say, coming straight out of Germany. Marijuana Moment reports Germany delays final vote on marijuana legalization bill until next year. Luckily for us, it's almost next year. A final vote on a bill to legalize marijuana in Germany that was initially planned for this week has been called off amid concerns from leaders of the country's Social Democratic Party, the SPD. The delay means that action on the landmark proposal will be postponed until next year. It always has to be approved by the parliamentary groups in the end, said Dirk Heidenblut, a SPD member of Germany's Bundestag, who was responsible for the party's cannabis policy, said in an Instagram post. And if a faction leader, in this case the SPD, has concerns, then it cannot be set up yet. Despite the delay, Heidenblut added that as long as the measure advances by the end of January, the delay shouldn't meaningfully impact the schedule for implementing legalization. If lawmakers pass the bill, the early stages of reform, including home cultivation for personal use, would begin as soon as April. The development in the latest of several delays to have slowed the bill's pace through Parliament. Lawmakers initially delayed their first debate on the legalization, which was held in October, ostensibly due to the conflict in Israel and Palestine. They also pushed back a vote scheduled for last month as supporters worked on the improvements to the bill. While Heidenblut's recent comments didn't elaborate on SPD's concerns or provide further detail on the delay, proponents of the legalization measure faced criticism in the Bundestag last week that suggested ongoing hesitancy about the policy change. At a meeting on Wednesday, Health Minister Karl Lauterbach took questions from members, some of whom opposed legalization. At several points, he pushed back against lawmakers who suggested that legalization would send the wrong message to youth and lead to increased underage consumption, saying their arguments misrepresented the legalization according to the translation. The fact remains that child and youth protection is carried out through education, and sales to children and young people remain prohibited, Lauterbach says. That is the only change we have made in this area, a tightening. Lawmakers also recently made a raft of adjustments to the bill, mostly designed to loosen restrictions that faced opposition from advocates and supporters in the Bundestag. They included increasing home possession maximums and removing the possibility of jail time for possessing slightly more than the allowable limit, which is really good. Lawmakers further agreed to stagger the implementation of the reform, making possession and home cultivation legal for adults beginning in April. Social clubs that could distribute marijuana to members would open in July. Officials are eventually planning to introduce a complementary second measure that would establish pilot programs for commercial sales in cities throughout the country. That legalization is expected to be unveiled after it's submitted to the European Commission for review. As for the latest delay, the German news outlet LTO reported that it's unclear whether the SPD faction leaders has a problem with the content of the law, or simply whether focusing on marijuana issues in times of budget crisis shortly before Christmas seems inappropriate to them. The Bundestag could now take up the measure as soon as January 18th or 19th, LTO said, or just in February. The German news publication Der Spiegel, meanwhile, reported that the hangup is a result of criticism from domestic SPD politicians. There was no agreement with the domestic politicians of the SPD faction at the time. Domestic politician Sebastian Fiedler told the outlet, if the law on cannabis legalization were to be voted on now, there would be a significant portion of no votes from the SPD faction, including my own. An SPD spokesperson in the Bundestag, meanwhile, told the publication, "We are confident that the law will be passed promptly in the new year in the Bundestag." A member of parliament from the Green Party, Kristen Gaunter, expressed disappointment about the delay. It is extremely unfortunate that cannabis is not yet on the Tagesordnung. Sorry if I slaughtered that. The legislative agenda in the Bundestag. A step up would have been a step up would have been possible. Cooper Gunter said. She noted that that the April start date for certain elements of legalization, however, can still be achieved if it's set up at the beginning of the year. Atis Upernar, who represents the left party in the Bundestag, didn't mince words on social media following the announcement of the delay. It is politically so stupid that the SPD leader is stopping the cannabis law, Gurpinar wrote in social media. It is once again bowing to the culture war of the right, and thereby making it bigger. The messing around of the legislaturing, the legislature in German, which I also slaughtered, keeps the issue on the boil from the right. Just get through it, damn it, he says. Members of the German public are also disappointed, as evidenced by social media posts from Carmen Wegge, a member of the SPD who supports the legalization proposal. Dear everyone, she wrote, if you are dissatisfied, please write me an email or contact me in another way. Finding out my employee's home number and making phone calls on the weekend doesn't result in a step up. The German Hemp Association has launched a protest action in response to the delay, in which it's urging lawmakers to move forward with a legalization bill. The group is asking supporters to send letters to their representatives to call for the bill to be passed without further restriction. The SPD faction that's holding up the process, the Hemp Association said, not only threatens to derail the country's timeline for legalization, but also contradicts the statement of all other parties involved that there is an agreement on their content of the bill. Following the bill's final reading in the Bundestag, it will go to the Bundesrat, a separate legislative body that represents the German states. Members of the Bundesrat tried to block the proposed reform in September, but ultimately failed. The legislation proposal is being spearheaded by Lauterbach, the health minister, who first shared details about the revised legislation plan in April. The following month, he distributed the legislative text to cabinet officials. Lawmakers in the Bundestag recently held a hearing in the Health Committee at which opponents criticized some elements of the proposal. The body also heard a competing policy proposal from the Union, a political alliance of the Christian Democratic Union and Christian Social Unions, the CDU and the CSU, that would not legalize marijuana, but instead improve health protection and strengthen education, prevention, and research, Cooper Gonthard said at the time. The health minister responded to early criticisms of the bill from medical and law enforcement groups by emphasizing that the reform would be coupled with a major campaign to educate the public about the risks of using cannabis. Germany's federal cabinet approved the initial framework from the legalization measure late last year, but the government wanted to get sign off from the EU to ensure that enacting the reform wouldn't put them in violation of their international obligations. The framework was the product of months of review and negotiations with the German administration and the Traffic Light Coalition government. Officials took a first step forward toward legalization last summer, kicking off a series of hearings meant to help inform legalization to end prohibition in the country. Government officials from multiple countries, including the US, also met in Germany last month to discuss international marijuana policy issues, and a host of the nation's works to enact legalization. A group of German lawmakers, as well as Narcotics Drug Commissioner Burkhard Bleinert, separately visited the US and toured California cannabis businesses last year to inform the country's approach to legalization. The visit came about 2 months after the officials from Germany, Luxembourg, and Malta and the Netherlands held the first of its kind meeting to discuss plans and challenges associated with recreational marijuana legalization. Leaders of the coalition government said in 2021 that they had reached an agreement to end cannabis prohibition and enact regulations for its legal industry. And they first previewed certain details of that plan last year. A novel international survey that was released last year found a majority support for legalization in several key European countries, including Germany.
Saman.
That's my story today, and what do y'all think?
Go for it, Rico.
Well, Edelweiss, Edelweiss. That's my little German for that. For the
Oh
morning.
boy. Oh
They're
boy.
taking advice from
You
California.
know, we covered it last week. It was a bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole law, the way the whole thing came out, and corporations are winning.
You know who's gonna win?
Globally.
You know who wins in this is Canada.
Globally.
Canada, because they have another outlet for all their boof weed.
From what I have heard, Germany has a pretty established trap market out there. It's been
That they
doing
do.
some
That they do.
been
Trapping
doing some big
Stupid.
things for years.
Yes.
So I think the people should not get all up in arms so quickly about this, because the trap always comes through.
Trapping shots.
Trapping
We
shot.
don't need
Dropping
anybody up in
shopping.
arms
Dropping
in Germany. Like,
shopping.
no more arms for y'all. You fucked it up, okay? You don't get any after
then
that.
we'll have an army, Yarda, so don't worry about that.
We're not gonna devolve into politics here, Yaro.
So what I really
I know
appreciate,
you want us to take that bait.
Yeah.
I
Jason
appreciate
definitely does.
Simon bringing us an international story, not being afraid of the length of the article in terms of the attention span of the viewers as well as the other guests. And you know, it's hard. It's hard.
Take the length of the
Story
story.
time left on the show.
Oh,
It's
Yeah, we
hard.
don't have
See-
time.
Yeah,
to
well,
go
let's
deep
go
into
to
that,
Todd.
Yaro.
Let's
We're
roll
almost
to
at the
Todd.
top of
Let's
the
roll to
hour,
Todd.
and
It's
the golden
hard to
voice
pronounce
has to
those
speak.
German words.
Yes.
I can't do it.
Yeah, we're
German
rolling.
Scheiße!
too many consonants.
Oh boy.
It's your commitment to the rehearsal,
We're not
Saman.
gonna get demonetized if I
That
say
is so
Scheisse.
admirable.
Oh jeez.
I do think it's an important market worth covering, and I do think there's some opportunity in Germany.
I think there's plenty of
Of course,
opportunity.
there's
in
opportunity in
Germany.
Germany. They got
And-
euros.
Yeah, Aurora Cannabis and those Canadian company Tilray are getting a second wind because of Germany.
Mhm.
Big shout out to them. You know, they sold all their assets in Canada and they moved their talents across the pond over to Europe.
I thought you were gonna
There's
say they
ever a
sold their
country
ass
that
out
needs
there.
to get high, it's Germany.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because we have seen them get low in the
for sure.
past.
Oh
That's
boy.
for sure.
Don't want to bring it back there. But we do have to keep this moving because we're close to the end of the hour. And up